You can now play the Revenge of the King and the Arena. Sound test mode's also been added. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kirby Superstar Ultra. In the last part, we finished off Milky Way Wishes, which is by and large the end of the original Kirby Superstar, barring that arena. But we're only at the 90% mark of the game period because we got about 3 more main campaigns to go alongside Arena and something else after that. For now, let's head after the Revenge of the King. King Dedede demands revenge. Will he finally reign victorious over his age-old nemesis? Let's find out. So that might look a little familiar, that whole setup there, and the fact we got the Stage 1 screen again. Return of the King is, by and large, a remake of Extra Mode in the original Kirby's Dreamland, but not quite. It's just the closest thing in comparison, because it's just a harder version, overall, of Spring Breeze. Enemies are replaced with stronger and faster variants, of which haven't been seen, I believe, since the original Kirby's Adventure Dream mode, or Extra Mode rather, like what replaces the Bronto Birds. But with that said, it's still a relatively short campaign. The biggest thing they changed overall is the boss fights and the last 2 stages. With that said, it's also the only one of the new campaigns we're going to be playing added to Superstar Ultra where you play as Kirby outright. Because all the others do things a little differently. We'll see more about those as we go. With that said, I'd still say this is easier overall than like even the original Kirby's Dreamland Extra Mode because, again, you have copy abilities. With that said, be careful when you're playing through this mode, as health items are reduced in amount period, but enemies have more health and attack harder, particularly the boss fights, and the boss fights themselves are especially more remixed. If you go for attacks like Beam or Hammer, or things that generally have a couple of distance moves, you're probably going to be safer overall, but you want to be careful all the same. Take advantage of helpers, especially around here, because you're going to find plenty of copy abilities around here. Oh, hi, Fan. I don't think we've actually seen you in the game so far at all. Be careful if you're trying to get up close to Fan, because they will throw you, and it will hurt. And I think it's almost a guaranteed loss of your power. I'm honestly not entirely certain what dictates you losing your power when you get hit in Superstar. Because it's not every time you get hit like it is in like Katam or Nightmare in Dreamland or, you know, Dreamland 2, 3. But it's not like only stronger attacks. It feels like it takes either certain HP thresholds or certain traits of attacks. Like electric attacks are more likely to do it. Blade attacks can do it, but just like bumping into things or something might not. The more I think about it, actually might be whether or not it's an actual attack hitting you or just bumping into things. But spikes also don't guarantee it every time, so I'm also gonna slowly use this opportunity that we're doing the Superstar Ultra exclusive stuff to talk about some Superstar Ultra exclusive trivia. For instance, something I'm not showing off throughout the LP. The FMV intro has a couple of variations as you progress through. For instance, there's a couple times where Kirby can just wink at the player when he's on the Warp Star and does a backflip instead of a loop. When you get into the campaign after this, Meta-Knight's Revenge, or no, Meta-Knightmare Ultra? That's what it is. There's a different intro that can play after you've accessed that. And on the title screen, Kirby can just make different faces, period. The main reason I'm not showing these off is it's completely random what sets them off. It could just be, it's all chance-based, really. And I don't feel like resetting the game 50 times to get about 10 seconds of footage-ish. With that said, time for our first boss fight. This is Wispy's Revenge. The main difference between this and the main Wispy, outside of HP and damage, he now actively blows tornadoes at you rather than just puffs of air, and when he tries to drop his apples, he can not only drop normal apples and I believe Gordos, but he can drop small caterpillars and poisoned apples. Poisoned apples cannot be digested by Kirby, period. In fact, when you inhale them, they explode, so they're hazards. Avoid them at all costs. Thankfully, it's pretty easy to tell which ones are the poisoned ones. I want to say this is probably the hardest Wispy ever gets, barring maybe an iteration, one of the 3DS games that's escaping the name of my brain right now. It is kind of refreshing to play through Return of the King, or is it Revenge of the King? I genuinely cannot remember at the moment. I think Return of the King is that Lord of the Rings movie now I think about it. If only because you actually get to see some enemies that are like classics, pull more of a threat out than the usual. Because usually whenever you see a new instance of an old enemy in a Kirby game, they come in at about the same difficulty to start. So like Wispy's usually your first boss and he's always starting as the easiest boss. But seeing a fight like this is very refreshing in my eyes. Something I find a little interesting though, Spring Breeze is overall meant to be the remake of Kirby Dreamland 1. But there's parts of level design here in Revenge of the King that are closer to Dreamland 1 than actual Spring Breezes. We'll particularly see that when we get to the Low Revenge fight, like that room's closer to how it was in the original game. Although if memory serves, the Low Castle stage is still by and large absent. On top of that, there's also a couple bosses brought back that weren't in Spring Breeze. On that note, let's talk about something that took me years to realize. On the bulletin board mode selection screen, the sort of main menu for the game, each of the 3 layers of games are tacked onto the billboard with a different color of pin, and they actually indicate something. Yellow pins are the games that are available by default in the original Superstar. Blue pins are the ones that need to be unlocked in the original Superstar, but the new red pins we've seen with Revenge of the King are minigames that are available only in Superstar Ultra. Is it a very needed distinction? No, not really, but I at least appreciate that there's like some visual flair going on to that. Because the bulletin board menu is probably one of my favorite parts about Superstar Ultra because there's a surprising amount of character to it. Like usually when you get a game that's any kind of collection of smaller games, you usually get a relatively characterless menu. Maybe that's set slightly to the aesthetics of the series, like the Mega Man ones have like that cyber aesthetic going on, or the 8-bit menu. But the bulletin board goes a long way to making Superstar feel like it's almost in a way kind of like a home craft or a home project, and there's something about me that really appreciates that. And that's an aesthetic Kirby would kind of take on a couple of times, and only just because of Epic Yarn. Because I'm also thinking some of the stuff that they have for mini-games in 64 kind of goes along that route. Kirby is a very homey feeling series, so I appreciate that, if that makes any sense at all. But now for the very important news. I forget if I mentioned this already. I may already have during like Spring Breeze. But this is the first Kirby game since Kirby 64 that in the North American box art had a happy Kirby. The era of angry Kirby was over for, what, like 3 games I think at most? We've gotten a couple of angry Kirby games since. It's a dumb trend, but I've always loved how they just edit Kirby to be angry on the American box arts. There's no real point to it besides maybe thinking that it'll be more popular to the Americans because he's nowhere near as adorable. But something about Kirby trying to be serious is just funny to me. Alright though, we actually got some mini-bosses that are exclusive to this mode overall, barring the arena stuff. Like the Flame Lion returning from, I think that was in only Katam before this? I'm probably wrong about that. But it's still pretty quick to take out, as you can see there. But there is no invincibility candy here, which is kind of rough. Nor is Crash here, I believe, so you can't take that shortcut through Lo and La. Speaking of which, let's talk about the differences. By and large, they still only push blocks around as the main attack, but like I mentioned earlier, the room is restored to the 4-path version that it was in the original Kirby's Dreamland. But on top of that, as you get down further into their HP, they start to try to fool around with you with where they're coming out. They'll have Gordos come out at the same time as them, so if you're trying to predict where they're going to come out, you might take some stupid hits. They can also push Gordos now, so you're only forced to attack them from behind. With that, I'd still say that I think honestly Lo and La are easier bosses than Wispy in general. Yeah, they move faster and are vulnerable during less of their fight. But you have such a high chance of dodging their attacks because they're in only straight lines that it's kind of pathetic. Let's see though. I brought up the Kirby series timeline during the boss fight to find out the exact time we were free from Angry Kirby on North American box starts, and it's about 3 years. The next Kirby game to have an Angry Kirby after this was Mass Attack, which was only 2 games later. But that was, to be fair, 3 years later, because I forget there was a 2-year break between Superstar Ultra and Epic Yarn. We were really kind of Kirby saturated in the early 2000s, partially because of the anime going on for a good portion of that. But like from the mid 2000s until 2011-12, we didn't get a lot again. But starting from 2014, we've basically gotten a game in the series in some form every year, even if it's a remake, barring 2021. And we already know we're getting one here in 2023 because Return to Dreamland Deluxe comes out actually exactly a month away at the time of recording. That looks like it'll be neat. I like that they're bringing back some of the mini games. I think we've already talked about this in the LP, but it's been like a week and a half since I started doing the recordings. I like that they're bringing back some of the mini games you haven't seen originally, even since the original Kirby's Adventure. So that's kind of neat. New powers is cool and all. I'm just wondering if it's going to be that worthwhile an upgrade if you already have the original. I noticed that the butterfly in the intro has an outline now, and there is potential lore implications there that I don't like and is terrifying, but we'll talk more about that when we eventually get to Return to Dreamland in some form. I'm kind of surprised, though, how little we see Kirby do this sort of second quest structure. Like, it's really just this and from memory Dreamland 1 that have done it. I remember Dreamland 2 or 3 doing it, and I don't think 64 does. Because there's something about how simplistic Kirby level design is with its enemies that I feel can really benefit from doing it more often. And I guess you sort of get them a little more commonly now because we get some modes, like the next mode we're going to be doing more often and such. But there's something about just making it harder levels with Kirby that feels like it could have a lot of appeal. Because when games like Zelda do it back when they did it a lot, it didn't work in my eyes. And it worked enough for Mario, but it needed to change more than just the enemy layouts. Also, that was Kracko Jr.'s Revenge. It just moves faster. That's the only boss that doesn't really have many changes whatsoever, kind of surprisingly. Something else that's different, I believe, about this particular level is I don't think you can go into the moon anymore to get to that little extra room where the Bonkers was back in Spring Breeze. I don't think there's an equivalent to that. If there is, tell me, because I genuinely don't know. Because I will say, in general, whenever I revisit Superstar Ultra, as rare as that is, because I don't really revisit Kirby games a lot anymore, I usually stop at Milky Way Wishes, because the Superstar Ultra modes are nice, but they just aren't as key in my mind as the main 6 are for the Superstar experience. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot of redoing stuff we've already done, even more so boss-wise than the main 6 campaigns were. So it just feels a little redundant, I guess. It's still cool modes, I think, for a first-time player, especially if you're used to the original Superstar. Superstar? Superstar. I'm adding letters, but they don't need to be now. My brain do the word good. But yeah, like, I don't think there's a way you can enter the moon here. If there is, tell me. I would be surprised. Kracko's Revenge is a lot harder than Kracko Jr.'s Revenge. The main difference is, outside of a speed increase, his star beam that he can fire out reaches further to begin with. He'll actively follow you with his rain attack rather than the original Kracko, which goes left to right or vice versa. And he has lightning attacks that he goes to the center of the screen to fire horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. And he fires a lot in a row. Similarly to the original Kirby's Dreamland, I'd overall say he's probably the hardest boss in this mode. The only thing potentially usurping that is the actual final boss of this against Dedede, but that's because that fight just has a lot of attacks. We'll get into when we get there. Blocking is wise to do here because you can just clip through a lot of the movement-based attacks, like Kracko's swerving, but ultimately not a lot to write home about still. Unlike what's coming next, because between stages, we got something new. her third appearance in the series, it's time for Kabula returning from the original Kirby's Dreamland. The only time she showed up between this and then is Kirby's Blackland on the Game Boy, or whatever it was called. And this is a much more complicated shooter boss than both the core of the Nova and her in the first game. She can fire individual bullets, but she can fire a three-way spread shot. She can fire Gordos out, which are completely invincible. She can charge at you, and most notably, towards the latter portion of her health bar, she'll fire giant bonsai bills at you. They can't be destroyed, and they are fast, so stay towards the left side of the screen. She's not exactly hard, but she can definitely be a little bit surprising compared to the earlier shooter boss in the game, and if you weren't expecting another boss between Kracko and DDD. With that said, the final stage has also seen a massive overhaul for Spring Breeze. Great King, Kabula's been defeated. What should we do? You mean Kirby's coming here now? Relax, Great King, you must stay calm. Right, well, here's what we do. Kirby will be ours. Alright. This is closer to how the final stage was handled in the original Kirby's Dreamland, where we're gonna have a lot more enemies in our way. It's not a straight up boss rush like Mount DDD was in Dreamland, but there are gonna be a lot more mini-bosses in the way than there used to be, as well as just a lot of standard enemies. With that said, use this opportunity to grab some favorite powers if you see them, because you got plenty in the way. First test him! Go, my servants! Like, for instance, we have Mr. TikTok here. I think it is only appearance in the game outside of the arena stuff that was added? He's not exactly hard. He's still the usual mini-boss he was in, like, Nightmare and Dreamland. He can fire music notes up in the sky. You can clear an area around him and all that. Ah, Great King, he had an easy time! Ah, we'll see what he likes the next. I'll always like weirdly southern DDD from the anime's dub. That dub was funny. That anime wasn't exactly great, but it was fun. I especially love the Japanese soundtrack for it, which is mostly a lot of remixes of actual Kirby music, rather than a lot of original stuff. In this room, we've got the Wheelie! Grand Wheelie. I always think this thing's name is that, but that said, because it's the Wheelie fight, it actually doesn't get to do a lot, as it spends a lot of its time in either corner. There are times I could recommend just grabbing that. Unthinkable! He beat that one too! Kirby's approaching here, Your Majesty! Cursed pink lump, I can't believe it. Great King, pull yourself together! Also, I believe this is notably the first appearance of Bandana D wearing the bandana? Because that would later become a playable character starting Return to Dreamland, but he's notably been around the series for a while. Because I want to say his debut was in one of the mini-games in the original Superstar, and I want to say they slightly have implied that the Waddle Doo you travel with in 64 is the same one? Third one's the job. Get him, Fan Fan. Fight! Oh god, why is Fan Fan covered in ketchup? What have you done to this poor thing? Something that I actually would advise having a helper for with Fan Fan alone is Fan Fan's a lot more likely to grab your helper than you. Great King, you beat Fan Fan too! Alright, call the cavalry. Yes, Your Highness. Because Fan Fan's main attack is to try to roll into you and grab you, and the helper's a lot more likely to get hit by that. But they won't actively take damage until that attack animation ends, and you can knock the helper out of Fan Fan's hands, so you can just kind of keep Fan Fan into a log. If only that was possible in Nightmare and Dreamland speedruns, because they probably would do that, because man, that fight's one of the least favorites in that community. Barring the 672 boss rush, whichever one it is. Alright, let's see what the cavalry is. Enough, Kirby! Face the Twin Fire Lions! Go get him! Oh, 2 bosses now. Oh, you spoil me. This is particularly where Plasma or Jet can come in handy for their projectile attacks, because you can hit both of them at once with, say, the Jet Spray or the Giant Plasma Beam. But at the end of the day, it's still 2 mini-bosses. Mini-bosses are seldom actually hard in Kirby. It's mostly just there to try and drain your resources like your health or your copy abilities. Or to tell you might need that copy ability coming up, but because this is mostly a boss rush, not really. Oh no, he beat everyone we have! Ah, can't anyone beat that guy? Probably not. I'm Kirby, look at me, I'm round, I'm pink, I'm adorable. Great King, Kirby made it here, what do we do? We're done for. Only one option. Okay then, I guess it's your turn. But Great King, I can't do it alone. Fine, you can go. You've been spared. Don't go, King! I'm sorry. Great King! Weirdly reused dialogue from Knight's Revenge, but oh well. It's time for my secret weapon. Now you pay, Kirby. Now that I think about it, what is actually meant to be like the reason we're going after DDD in this mode? I actually forget. Let me take a look if I can find that real quick. I think it says something that the Kirby wiki has no actual plot on this scenario, so we really are just kind of going after him on our own this time, aren't we? Kirby's vindictive. Who knew? Alright, next boss fight. Waddle Dee. He runs towards you, and that's it. You can keep him locked in the corner very easily. He's the hardest boss in this game. At least that's the joke. If you want to make that fight really funny, just inhale him. I think it's an instant kill. It's kind of funny. Get a free heal because we're coming up on the final boss for the mode. You made it here. Now I'm yourself. Like with Meta-Knight, we get a free hammer, which I will take. Our grudge will be settled at last. Meet my powerful secret weapon, the brand new DDD hammer. Masked DDD's theme is one of my favorite Kirby songs, just period. It's so good. Masked DDD himself is a pretty complicated boss. You actually can't avoid his attacks by flying too easily here because he has a metal electric net set up that prevents you from flying too high. You can still hover over him to avoid his spin attack he does with his hammer eventually, as well as most of the projectiles he fires out of his hammer. But the hammer itself is honestly the biggest threat overall, as now whenever he strikes the floor, there's a pretty good chance it'll just send an electric wave across the bottom in the direction he's facing. But as you can see, if you use a hammer, it's also very easy to just kind of stun lock him in place, so it's kind of still disappointingly not a fight, really. Until he hits you at the last second. That's just rude. That's Revenge of the King. It's a harder Spring Breeze, but I do think it has some more interesting things going on in it between the returning Kabula after so long and a more interesting DDD fight. It's still not a lot to write home about, though, overall. If there's a mode that's worth picking up Superstar Ultra over Superstar Original for, it's not this one, it's the next one. As it not only has a lot more meat, it lets you play as a character that you've been able to play for in these games for a while now, because even Nightmare and Dreamland had a mode you could play as them. But that mode has a lot more unique stuff going on in it mechanically, and if its level design is even less original than this one is. Honestly, the biggest thing we got out of this mode overall is Mask DDD period, because I think that mask is pretty cool, and the fight theme itself, which is one of my favorite Kirby songs period, as I said before. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 11, we're checking out the second mode they added for Superstar Ultra. See you guys then.